sorry, the mic wasn't on. Good morning. We'd like to get started right now. We appreciate you being here today. It's a bigger turnout than I thought we'd have. We have how many online? 30. So we appreciate your support. It's been a year and a half since we last met. It was January of 2020. And at that time, we heard about this virus over in China, and wasn't much we thought of it. A month or two later, it really changed our lives. Things have changed dramatically. So it's good to be back here, and we appreciate your support over the last year and a half with the difficult times we have. We had a lot of changes. We have a new president who has a different look on oil and gas production. We have a new governor, and he has changed some of his departments, where we have a new director of CLIPCO and also a new director of OED, and we're going to hear from some of them represented today and see the direction they're taking with this. Before we get started, I'd like to turn some time over to John Baza. He has a few things to say from the Department of Natural Resources.
Thanks, John. And most of you know me. I'm John Baza. I'm the director of the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. First of all, I'd like to thank John Rogers for making these arrangements. Probably at least 2 years ago, I asked John to just take care of this meeting and manage it and coordinate it and help develop the agenda each time. And he's done a great job at that. So I really appreciate John's effort on this. I just asked John for a few minutes this morning. One of the things that we've had to address, and it's happening very rapidly within the Department of Natural Resources, is the water crisis that we're in right now, the extreme drought conditions that we have in the state of Utah. To borrow a phrase that the governor used a few weeks ago, we moved from one crisis, the pandemic, into the new crisis, which is the drought. And I just want to bring that to your attention. It varies across the state how much snow and runoff we got, but overall the state is in a pretty dire situation. I think that the hope is that conservation efforts this year will help us make it through the year. But the real worry is we're concerned that this is a multi-year climate event, and we don't have any control over that, but it does mean that things like water planning and how we use water are ever more important. So I bring it up in this meeting for two reasons. As oil and gas operators are out there, please look at how you're using water. I know we have lots of secondary recovery operations going on. Most of that is using recycled water, produced water, and that's a good thing. And we want to applaud those companies that are doing that. But if there are other uses of fresh water, whether it's for fracture stimulation or other things, please look at how you might look at conserving that fresh water usage. I know I've talked in this meeting before about the produced water studies and research that the Groundwater Protection Council is doing. And, we've always said that maybe the idea of cleaning up produced water for drinking water or ag purposes isn't that feasible. But if produced water could be used to displace other uses of fresh water, that basically creates more fresh water for people to utilize. So again, I bring that to your attention as an industry, that if you can look at ways to conserve water in your operations, we're happy to entertain some innovative thoughts that you might have. The second thing is, because we are a part of the Department of Natural Resources and state government, and we're supporting the efforts of government in the drought efforts, we're going to be looking critically at any situations involving contamination, and that's both surface water and groundwater. So we'll be looking for that, and if there are situations that could be a risk of contamination of fresh water, we'll need to take action on those very quickly to address those, because we don't want to ruin any of the fresh water supplies we already have in place. The last thing I'll say around this subject is in September, the Groundwater Protection Council, this national organization that Utah belongs to, is having its first in-person annual forum in the past 2 years. And that's going to be right in Salt Lake City. And it'll bring representatives from other states into Salt Lake City, and we'll have a conference and we'll talk about issues just like these, because GWPC is kind of a focus group for the nexus of water and energy. So you'll hear from both the water quality side and you'll hear from the oil and gas folks who are using water in the various states. So if you're interested, the dates of the meeting are September 26th through the 29th. You can go to the GWPC website, which is gwpc.org, and you'll find the event shown there. And they just barely opened up the registration for that event on the website. So keep that in mind. It'll be in downtown Salt Lake in September, and we'll have a good program for you. So that's all I had to say. Do you have any questions for me? Can't see any. So John, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, John, for that important message. Concerns all of us. I'd like to recognize Yvonne Garrison, a member of our board. She's here today, and we appreciate her support and all they do for the division. Also on our Google Meets, we appreciate if you keep your microphone muted, and if you have a question, please use the raise hand option there, and our group will be watching for that. So at the end, we'll have opportunity for questions, and then during our collaborative period, we can talk. On our agenda today, we have Jake Garfield of the Utah Public Lands Policy Office, PLPCO as we know them, and he's going to talk about the new direction and where PLPCO is going in this critical time of oil and gas and the change we're seeing. Following Jake, we have Matt Anderson, who's a Deputy Director of the Utah Office of Energy Development, better known as OED. And finally, we have Bart Kettle, who's the Deputy Director of Utah Oil and Gas and Mining. And he's going to address our new dogma rule on penalties. We were given a statute, and we needed to come up with a rule to apply that statute. And so he'll be addressing that with something that will be new to the division and the changes we've made there. I'd like to start off with a little, just give you some history of where we've been. Here's a graph. I know graphs can kind of put you to sleep, but this is very important as we look at where we're headed. This, oops, went back. This is the oil production over the last couple of years. And if we look here, this is the month of April. We're about 2 months behind because we don't get production in for that period of time. And we haven't finalized our April. So that's a March number there. But my preliminary numbers look like we're right around in that range. So we can see that last month we had a great increase in production. And we hope that trend holds out, because you can see a year ago where we were. It looked pretty drastic. And we were hoping that this trend wasn't going to continue like that, but we saw that rebound. So that's the good news here. We were about 2.7 million barrels in, let's see, that's March. And so we're about to 2.6 in that range. So that's a positive trend. Also, we're looking here on the gas side. We can see that also increase in gas production. And I looked at the preliminary numbers. We bounce out to here a little bit. So hopefully we'll see that trend increase. As you see here, we call gas produced and gas transported. Gas produced is at the wellhead, but sometimes we see lost due to either flaring or used on lease. But this is the number we look at as gas transported, actually receiving dollars from. So if you look back a year ago, where were we? And this is rather dramatic. June of 2020, 0 rigs in the state were operating. Now we have 10 going. The U.S. rig count was 255 last June. Now we're up to 464. Long ways to go, but what an improvement. Spuds in June of last year, 0. 24 in June of 21. And as you look here, pricing, 38.36. This is an average for the month, and this is where we average for June. This is even outdated right here. This was last Monday when I put this slide together. We're now down to about 71, but the futures look fairly bright and not as high as 76, but they're looking in the 74 range. And so we can see prices increasing too. So it's a very positive thing with him. Here's Brent crude. I throw that on there just to give you a worldwide perspective. And even gas prices. This is Henry Hub, but we get something similar to that with some deductions, but look how high that's gone. So we're seeing a change in oil and gas over the last year. And if we were sitting there last year at this time, I think we all had kind of gloomy faces. So it's a positive. I put together this slide. I do a monthly analysis on where the industry is going worldwide. And I know it looks a little bit confusing, but what we have here is world consumption is the red line, okay? As we look back here in the height of the pandemic, when it first came on, look at the consumption. It went way down. And what corresponded with that consumption drop, but production staying high, we saw that drop in price. Remember when we went down to negative 39? Average for the month was about 18. So there we are about a year ago. So as OPEC made some concessions and they cut back production, we see the production dramatically decline here. And then consumption gradually outpaced it. And so as we saw that, it pushed prices upward. As we see a steady decline, this is WTI with its dollar figure on the right here. We can see how that has climbed dramatically, even up to the above 70. Actually, I had to change my glass. I wasn't very optimistic. I stopped at 60, so that's good to see. I thought we're literally off the chart there. And this is just a difference between consumption and production. So what this tells us is that we need to keep an eye on world oil production and consumption. Even out here in the basin, we're driven by world economics. And I wanted to talk about some things that are going on now. OPEC Plus got together last week, and they wanted to increase production about 400,000 barrels a day, and then increase that 400,000 barrels a day over the next month from August to December. So in that period of time, they would increase the overall production up 2 million. And so we thought that was a very reasonable thing, that keeps things under control. But the two entities, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, didn't agree on that. UEA wanted more oil. They wanted to produce more. So there's kind of an internal battle with those two, and they walked away from the table. The fear is that now will some of these entities just go off and do what we call or they call the pump and dump, what we saw last April when they just produced like crazy and drive that production level up, will drive prices down. So keep your eye on what's happening over there with OPEC, because it really affects us here with the price of oil. So it's critical to realize the connection we have here in the basin to worldwide economics. So overall, I would have to say we're looking fairly well as far as the industry has bounced back. It's much better than I thought we would have been a year ago. So that's news from the division. And any questions you may have, we have Bart Kettle here. He could answer some too, and John Baza if wanted to. Any questions? Okay, well, we'll then continue on. And I believe Jake from Flipco will be up, so appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, my name is Jake Garfield. I am Deputy Director for a small state agency called the Public Lands Policy Coordinating Office. And like John said, a lot of people refer to us as PLIPCO. Our role within state government is kind of unique. We don't have jurisdiction or over any resources or any regulatory authority, but our mission is to be the main point of contact with the federal land management agencies, with the Forest Service and the BLM primarily. As we've had a new governor come into the state, we have a new director as well. His name is Reg Johnson. He's has spent a lot of time out here in the basin. I think some of you may know him, and Reg as well as the governor are both extremely supportive of the oil and gas industry, and they want to see the state investing more into the Uinta Basin and building up and investing in economic growth out here. So as our mission is to, as I said, be the main point of contact with the federal land management agencies, unfortunately, that often leads to contentious situations where we end up in litigation. And often that's in circumstances where the federal government has made a decision that the state supports that aligns with the state's priorities, and then the federal government's been sued by environmental groups and we intervene in support of the federal decision. Or there's certainly other situations where the federal government makes decisions that are negatively impact development, negatively impact oil and gas, and we sue the federal government directly because they don't support with what the state wants to see. And as you can imagine, there's been more of those decisions coming out of the federal government lately. So there's been more circumstances where we have been suing the federal government. The most significant of those was in the early days of the Biden administration. There was a executive order that did a lot of bad things for the oil and gas industry, but I think that probably the most damaging was a moratorium on quarterly oil and gas lease sales. And the interpretation of our offices was that this was a flagrant violation of the law, that the federal law dictates that the BLM needs to hold oil and gas lease sales quarterly. And so this lawsuit actually was taken on by the Attorney General's own executive team, but with support from our office, from the attorneys in our office. And the state, there were many other states who shared the same position. So the state of Louisiana actually filed suit against the Biden administration. In Louisiana, we joined that lawsuit, and we're just a couple weeks ago got a favorable decision from a federal judge there. He said that the Biden administration's executive order was unlawful and issued an injunction against this moratorium. So now the BLM will be required to start holding quarterly oil and gas lease sales. The catch is that I don't think the judge didn't say how many parcels need to go up in a lease sale, so they might be doing very few, which would be unfortunate. And there's a chance that the administration could appeal this decision. If they do appeal, we will certainly be continue to fight this in circuit court so that we can make sure these oil and gas lease sales keep happening. But on the front end, before things get to litigation, our office is very involved with working with the BLM and other federal agencies to make sure that that the state is encouraging oil and gas development on our federal lands. So when a lease sale is proposed by the BLM, we're the agency that consults with our colleagues at DOGM and other federal agencies to let the BLM know that we support these quarterly oil and gas lease sales. They need to happen. If there are specific concerns with a particular parcel because of water resources or something like that, we may propose some sort of forms of mitigation. But overall, the policy of the state, as you can imagine, is that we support these oil and gas development and want to see them go forward. It's the same thing at when there's an application for a permit to drill. The BLM asks for comment from local government and from the public, and we again let the federal agencies know that we support these applications for permits to drill generally. And when we make these comments, we consult with county commissioners in the respective counties to see if there's any concerns from local government, which there generally are not, and then make sure that we're supporting these initiatives. There's other things that are happening at the federal level that they're not ripe for litigation. We're not suing the feds yet, but we're making sure that the federal government knows where the state of Utah is. There's a initiative going through the Biden administration that they're calling the 30 by 30 campaign. The idea is that 30% of lands in the United States should be protected by the year 2030. And that's a scary thing for a state like Utah that has so much public land. It's easier for the federal government to create national monuments or what have you on public lands than private lands. So we are worried that we could be a target for this initiative, that there could be more land locked up here and that made off limits to development. since there's nothing has actually happened, so there's been no lawsuits filed or anything like that. But we've made the administration know our position that Utah should not be, that we already have over 30% of our lands protected here in Utah. There's no need to do more of that, and that whatever the administration does, it needs to respect the oil and gas industry and stay away from our lands, from putting more restrictions on our lands that are productive, that are so critical to our oil and gas industry here. Something that we've worked on over the last couple of years is we've created a state resource management plan and helped each county create their own county resource management plans. As we're interfacing with the federal government, we rely on these plans and expect that the federal agencies in their own decision making are consistent with the state plan and the respective county plans. And the county plans, as well as the state plans, make it very clear that the counties and the state support oil and gas development, and that decisions at the federal level need to reflect that and need to be supportive of oil and gas as well. Our agency often is involved in infrastructure projects that are happening on federal lands. The most significant for the oil and gas industry here in the Uinta Basin is, of course, the Uinta Basin Railway. And we're not the lead on that. It's being led by a coalition of counties, of the 7-county infrastructure coalition. But we are the lead state agency in encouraging that project to move forward. There's a federal agency called the Surface Transportation Board that's analyzing that proposal through an environmental impact statement, and we are engaged in that whole process, making sure that they're doing the process the right way, that they're considering all the economic benefits that would happen to the Uinta Basin and the oil and gas industry out here, and getting the message across that this is supported by the governor and by the state government, that this needs to happen. Our agency also works closely with the Utah Division of Wildlife on helping keep sensitive species off of the endangered species list. And the most significant of those right now, I would say, is the sage grouse. There's a fair amount of sage grouse habitat out here in the Uinta Basin. It's a species that its population goes through cycles where sometimes it'll do really well, and after a couple of years there will be declines before it starts going back up again. And there's environmental groups who want to use the declines in the sage grouse population to push for more restrictions on development generally and on oil and gas in particular, which is a scary thing. And so our office and the Division of Wildlife have gone to a lot of efforts to work with local governments and industry to create a plan to protect this species in a way that's still flexible, that doesn't put overly burdensome regulations on the sage grouse, or excuse me, on the oil and gas industry out here in the Uinta Basin. There's so far it has been successful. Several years ago, there was a real push to get this bird placed on the endangered species list, and because of the success of the state's conservation plan, that the Fish and Wildlife Service said, no, we're not going to list this species. That was a big win, but it's still a complicated thing. There's the BLM, despite it not being a listed species, still has their own plans to manage the habitat for greater sage grouse, and there's things in those plans that are not favorable to oil and gas development. So we've pushed back on that, and then there's also litigation going on there. So there's multiple fronts. And unfortunately, under this administration, we expect there will be a new drive to put the greater sage grouse on the endangered species list, which I think would be a really negative thing for the state and for economic development here in the Uinta Basin region. So we are continuing to fight that fight, suggest things that can be done to keep these birds alive, keep their habitat healthy, while still allowing successful oil and gas development in proximity of these birds. We also work with other state agencies on endangered plants. There's quite a few of those in the Uinta Basin. The hookless cactus is one example. The penstemon is another example. The overarching goal of both our agency and the state government is to keep these plants like this off the endangered species list, or if they are on that list, to find ways to conserve them so they can be moved off of that list and we no longer have federal regulation over what can happen on the habitat of these species. Final thing I want to discuss is our commitment in this office to public access and keeping roads open. It's not directly related to oil and gas, but I do think it is indirectly, because if public lands don't have roads, if they're not accessible, then it's a lot more difficult to use them for development of oil and gas or other natural resources. On that front, we both have a massive lawsuit. There were a series of lawsuits against the federal government to keep roads open on BLM land in a significant chunk of Duchesne County and a huge expanse of Uinta County as well. It's a long process, but we are going throughout communities and in the Uinta Basin, talking to people to get their testimony about how they've used roads on BLM land in the past, so we can make sure there's a public right of way to those roads. Over the years, we've spoken to a lot of employees of the oil and gas industry here in the Uinta Basin who have throughout their careers used those roads, and we've then had depositions with those folks, which has been so helpful and allowed us to have really good evidence for why these roads need to stay open. And there's also just county roads that we don't have they're not part of litigation, but that there are environmental groups who would push to have these roads closed. In the Book Cliffs in particular, there's what's called a BLM travel management plan going on. That's a real kind of tug of war right now, where some folks want to close more roads out there, but the state and our agency understand how important the Book Cliffs is for the oil and gas industry in the state, and for so many other uses as well. And we are fighting to keep those roads out there open so they can be used by hunters, by campers, by just people on their ATVs, but of course by the oil and gas industry as well. So that's just an overview of what our office does. It's a lot of different things. But again, I just want to emphasize that our agency, as well as the governor, are trying to track down any places where the oil and gas industry could be attacked by the federal government or by environmental groups, and respond to that in an effective way, and do what we can to keep the industry here in the Uinta Basin strong. Do we have any questions?
The mic here.
Oh.
Questions, anyone? Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, so can I answer the second question first? So yes, there was a lawsuit, I believe, from the state of Montana on the social cost of carbon. And we joined that lawsuit. It was led by the executive team of the Attorney General's office, but we've been offering support to that office as well. Last I checked, that was kind of hung up in administrative procedures in federal court, and we have not heard a lot there, but we will continue to be very engaged in that lawsuit if it moves forward. We've got, again, a coalition of states who are involved in that lawsuit. It's the direction that the administration proposed of the social cost of carbon, I think, could really damage oil and gas leasing on federal lands, and we don't think that they have the authority to do that. They're not relying on federal laws to do that, and we don't think it's within the administration's discretion. So we will continue to be engaged there. Unfortunately, sometimes these federal cases can take a long time, and there hasn't been a injunction granted there like there was on the other lawsuit, which was on the the quarterly lease sales, but we would hope to see that there. So we'll continue fighting that battle. On the on the permitting program, we've heard that, we've been hearing these same rumors. We don't have, I mean, Mike, have you heard anything more on that side? Oh, by the way, I needed to mention, part of our office really has a strong, because we have a strong commitment to the Uinta Basin, we actually have hired Mike Hyde as to work for our office. He's been the Uinta County Planner, Community Development Director for a long time, and he's now still working for the county. We're working for our office as well. He's still living here in Duchesne County and working in out of the Duchesne County building, but he's working for our office as well, and we're so grateful to have him. But yeah, did you want to mention or discuss that, Mike?
Yeah, I think the DOI had a learning session about that here a few months ago about those changes, and I participated in that and asked a few questions, and we're hoping that they will actually do as they say and actually try to involve some of our local communities and states in the process. And so we're going to be monitoring that, as well as the ONRR valuation rule and what happens with that here in the near term. And I'll continue to coordinate with you, Ricky, on that, and also with the Western Energy Alliance to try to weigh in from not only the Uinta Basin standpoint, but also the state of Utah standpoint, and try to end up with a place that we can all live with. And as Jake said, PLPCO is reaching out and trying to grab some good people from around different parts of the state. They have some people on board now from down in southern Utah, and they're hoping to not just have all their people in Salt Lake, but have them out in the various regions. And I'm glad that I can try to communicate Uinta Basin needs to PLPCO. And I came here in 2004, started working for Duchesne County. Prior to that, I had been a city planner all my career. And when I came here to the county, I got exposed to public lands issues really quick. And we started working with Forest Service and the BLM and helping the county commissioners as they weighed in on those issues. Helped with the county resource management plan that Jake mentioned. We've had a public lands policy in our county resource or a county master plan for a number of years. I think Alan Smith may have been involved in that way back in the 1990s, early 2000s. Well, we took that and expanded it in 2017, and it has been a good tool to show the federal agencies what the local plans and policies are out here, and that they need to be consistent with them to the greatest degree possible. So I'll be working with Jake and others at PLPCO on the railroad as that progresses, and some of these other issues. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, just talk to me during a break or after the meeting. I'll get you my card, and we can discuss things. Thank you.
So that was a very long answer, but did that answer your questions?
We're all waiting.
Right.
The answer, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
I got a question. With the abundance of federal land out here and the on again, off again policy towards permitting with administration, what do you feel from operators? Are they just going to sit back and wait, or they can say, I'd rather go somewhere else because of the unknowns there? Maybe Ricky, you may even know about how they're thinking about it. Because they really are on an unstable platform.
Got a room full of them.
Okay. Anyone that's concerning when you think about they don't know from day to day how to find it.
I would agree that it is definitely a threat long term. About the lack of regulatory certainty, all been saying that for years. I would balance that with the graphic you showed this morning, about 10 grow rigs in the state right now. That's very optimistic, and the question is just what we can do to keep those rigs all here.
Yeah, and I would say part of the reason why thank you for the invite to this meeting. We want to come out to these meetings more often so we can just get the pulse of people out here, and so we can communicate that back to the BLM, or to the federal government generally, that if people are pulling out because the uncertainty regarding permitting and regulations, we need to be able to tell that story and let them know just how damaging flip-flopping can be. So.
Jake, do you have a litigation fund that manage, or is each lawsuit get appropriated specifically? How does that work on a financial?
That's a great question. We have a whole section of the Attorney General's office that is embedded full-time in our agency. And for most of the litigation, it's just we're handling that in-house. So it's just our salaried attorneys going after the litigation. When there are certain lawsuits where, the Attorney General has deemed it necessary to bring in outside counsel, and then there's been, I guess, funds within the Attorney General's office that's been used for that, or there's been special appropriations from the legislature. So there are, but generally it's just work from our salaried employees. We also, during this last legislative session, there was a one-time appropriation to our office that was not specifically earmarked for litigation, but the intent language certainly could. I mean, that could be an option for the use of this. Of these funds, if there's a special need that would require outside resources or funds beyond what we have the capacity to do. But we have some really great attorneys on our staff, and when things do crop up, we are generally pretty well equipped to handle stuff with the people we currently have. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Any other questions or? All right. Well, thank you very much. And please talk to me or Mike after we've wrapped up. We'd love to meet more of you. Thanks.
Okay, I have confidence in this one works, so don't be afraid of any questions. We'll test it out next time. So we'd like to continue on with Matt Anderson with OED.
Okay, there you go. Great. Thanks. Next to it. So first off, John, I know it's a 9 o'clock meeting, but we didn't need that wake up call by the microphone there. I mean,
I don't know. Say this word.
heck of an alarm clock. Good to be with you here today. My name is Matt Anderson. I am the Deputy Director of the Office of Energy Development. I almost said Governor's Office of Energy Development, but we've recently changed our name, and I'll get into that a little bit later. We have a new director of our office, Tom Carter. He's unfortunately can't be here with us today, but he sends his regards. Tom often says that he should live in the basin and commute down to Salt Lake because he's here so much. I said that would be a good choice. I live in rural Utah, and I said the more people we can get in rural Utah from the state, the better. So it's great to live up in Cache County. My comments today will focus on three things. First, what is OED? Second, the role of OED's new oil and gas liaison. And three, OED's energy resources story map. So to begin with, what is OED? I get that question a lot as I go around the state. People aren't familiar with what we do. We're a very small office. We only have 12 people. And so we don't get a lot of the attention that the other larger agencies and offices do. So in 2010, Governor Gary Herbert announced his intent to create a strategic energy plan. As a part of this plan, OED was created. Our mission statement says that the purpose of OED is to advance the governor's energy vision, implement state energy policy, and enhance Utah's energy infrastructure, technology, and workforce to provide more affordable, reliable, and cleaner energy options for Utah households and businesses. So that's a lot of mumbo jumbo, but what does it mean? What are the activities that we do? Well, the first thing we do is we try to educate. And we do that by working with universities and trade schools to create curriculums so we can produce students who are ready to fill the jobs in the workforce in the energy sector, including oil and gas. We help provide scholarships to students, and we hold events to try to recruit students to the STEM fields so they can be prepared to meet Utah's energy needs. The second thing that we do is we have Department of Energy related programs. We have a number of program specialists in our office who are entirely funded by the U.S. Department of Energy. They work on things like alternative transportation, energy efficiency of homes and businesses, and energy resilience. The third thing that we do is incentives. If anyone here have solar panels on their home? No, okay, I might be the only one. What we do is we provide tax credits for people who put solar on their homes or their businesses. We have a high cost infrastructure tax credit as projects are put in to help cover the cost of that. We do the alternative energy development incentives and many more. So we're trying to attract those things to the state. The next thing that we do is research and studies. We partner with universities as well as nonprofits and others to provide studies to give information about energy and the resources we have here to the public so they can be aware of it, especially the oil and gas industry. There's a number of reports that we've put out over the last 10 years about that. The fifth thing that we do is we advise the governor, and we serve as a resource to the legislature. My boss, Tom Carter, serves on the governor's cabinet as the energy advisor and goes to him with information regarding a host of issues that we have in the state. And then the last thing we do, number 6, is work to attract energy-related businesses and create a business-friendly environment here in the state. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we do. We do a lot more than that, but I had to put it into 6 things. That's it. There's a couple guiding principles that we have in our office under the Cox administration that we've kind of been directed to do. The first thing that we go around telling people, and we truly believe, is that all energy comes from the ground. In this room, we know that oil and gas comes from the ground, but what a lot of people don't understand is that green energy comes from the ground. If it's a wind turbine or a solar panel, you're still getting those resources out of the ground, and mining and extraction still needs to take place in order to provide that clean energy as well. The next thing that we talk about is Governor Cox is energy agnostic, meaning we believe in all of the above energy, but he's not job agnostic. We believe in jobs, and we know how important those are, especially here in the basin, right? One job here in the basin is equivalent to 100 jobs in Salt Lake County. So we know how important the oil and gas industry is to you all out here. Another guiding principle is that our past success and future success is largely determined by our ability to establish positive relationships with key stakeholders, including elected officials and energy producers. And then the last thing that we like to talk about is that energy is useless, but power is valuable, meaning we have to have transmission or ways to get energy where it's going. The Uinta Railway is a great example of that, being able to get the products here in the basin to where they need to go. We always want to talk about production of energy because it's the sexy, hot topic thing, but without transmission, it doesn't really matter. So we need to make sure that we're doing that and we engage in those issues as well. As I mentioned before, we've changed our name recently. We're no longer the Governor's Office of Energy Development, but we are the Utah Office of Energy Development. This past legislative session, 2021, there was House Bill 346, which did that. This legislation brings OED into DNR, and the goal is to ensure that energy works hand in glove with DNR, that we knock down the silos that keep our offices from working better to promote what is best for Utah. So in other words, now that we're housed under there, we are able to work with our sister agencies and offices much more effectively and efficiently than we did before, including on messaging. And that's a big part of what our office does too. So we've been working with the Division of Natural Resources communication specialists on a number of things, and that's been a positive change that we've seen. But really, that's the biggest thing that changed. There won't be much changes other than that, than a name change to our office. Tom Carter still the energy advisor to the governor. We're still doing what we do normally. It's a code change and then, of course, a name change mostly. So the next thing I want to talk about, and this was brought up briefly with Jake about moving jobs out of Salt Lake City and moving them to places around the state, rural areas, and we're focusing on that as well. Oil and gas production are a key part of Utah's economy and energy future. Energy-related employment in Utah climbed by over 15,000 jobs in September of 2019, with the majority of employment, 25%, coming from the oil and gas sector. Utah's petroleum industry accounted for over 59% of Utah's energy production in 2018. And then lastly, Utah's refined petroleum production totaled a new annual record of 79.7 million barrels produced in 2019. So we know how important oil and gas production is, and that's why we are creating a new position that will be located out here in the basin. It is an oil and gas liaison. We're in an interview process right now. We're down to 3 candidates, and we're going through that. That individual will either be located in Duchesne or Uinta County and be out here full time to meet with producers, elected officials, and the tribe. So the oil and gas liaison, this is directly from the job description, is responsible for expanding responsible oil and gas development and delivery in the Uinta Basin and throughout the state of Utah. The oil and gas liaison will build, strengthen, and manage relationships with oil and gas stakeholders, including elected officials, tribal governments, producers, industry associations, refineries, and other businesses to support the extraction industry. So a couple of the activities that this individual will be engaging is attending and presenting at city, county, and state meetings, conferences, and industry association meetings, facilitating and moderating discussions between stakeholders, promoting public awareness campaigns throughout Utah about the importance of the oil and gas industry, and collaborating with academic institutions and industry groups to produce studies and gather information on the oil and gas industry here in the state. So essentially what they're going to do is serve as the eyes and the ears of our office here in the basin. I expect to meet with this individual regularly. This individual will report directly to me. So I'll both be coming out here, and that individual will be coming to Salt Lake to meet with me to discuss what's going on here. So I really encourage you, once we get this individual on board, to meet with them. They're going to be very valuable in making sure that we know what's going on out here and that we can get that directly to the governor and elected officials. The next thing I want to focus on is our energy resource story map. This is something that our office put together and was released in January of this year. It's a really cool project that was done by one of our data analysts, Kevin Brooks. I'm just going to pull it up here. There we go. Did it. John, looks like I'm having some trouble getting this up.
We may have to go back into this. Is that it there?
And then it's, if you go down here and click on that. Perfect.
Okay, got it.
Oh, it's still up.
This one?
That's what we need.
That one. So this one here?
No, it's that website specifically that needs to show up. So maybe we can just get rid of the PowerPoint presentation entirely.
Yeah, are you done with that?
Yeah, it's fine. I can share with people what it is after.
Okay, so now where am I at here?
Here, let me try this. You gonna let me?
Let me just go. That one. Where did we have it here? Remember? Maybe I got to go to my.
I just have to pull.
Just got to turn this on. Okay.
Yep. Perfect.
There we go.
Thanks. Awesome. So this is the map that we created. It is a really unique resource and can provide a lot of opportunities. It's an interactive map. And as you go through it, you can see that we have these different tabs here at the top, including coal, petroleum, natural gas, solar, geothermal, wind, hydroelectric, biomass, and hydrogen. So let's click on natural gas, for example. And it comes up with a map, and it also comes up with some information over here, as well as some videos about natural gas. And you can see, as you look at the basin here, where those resources are located. And you can zoom in, and there is a land ownership map that includes federal lands, state lands, Sitka lands, that's overlaid on top of it. So you can see where those resources are located in relation to those lands. We've seen this as a great resource, especially with the public. All of you here likely know where the oil and gas resources are in the basin. But if you need to go out to a conference or you're meeting with people in the public, you can use this map and show them. So it's a great resource that way. Plus, they can learn more about it. Another neat one, kind of like the geothermal one, You can see all the geothermal that we have down here in Millard County and in Beaver County. But it goes through and it's an excellent resource. And I encourage you to use it. If you want more information about it or you're going to use it in a presentation, please reach out to me in our office. I'll gladly walk you through it, or I'll have Kevin Brooks, who created the map, walk you through it. So with that, that's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I'm going to put my email address up there. But yeah, any questions?
Okay, plug your ears. I'm gonna turn this on, let's see. Hear me? Can you hear me now? There we go. All right. Any questions? Come on, we got the mic. We're gonna get one. Irene.
Talk really loud so I don't need.
Okay.
Oh, online audience.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear me.
Sure they, there you go.
I'm going to kind of, it's on a similar subject, and I think it's important. I have 3 granddaughters going to college, and I gave them money for their graduation and told them that I was going to do an energy oil field education day, and they didn't get their money till they attended, which they were all happy to do, and they're all giving me a hard time about it and teasing me, and so in a situation like that, and we're talking about educating not only people who live here, but people from the outside, and those kinds of things, what kind of resources are there available? Now, luckily, I think I can pretty well do it verbatim, but I think it's important that those kinds of things are available. I would challenge Basin folks to do that with their kids and grandkids so that they understand how valuable the industry is, what it does for the state of Utah, for our nation, as well as how environmentally, they're held to the highest standard. Those are things that they're not going to learn probably in school. So just curious what kind of resources there are available. And I invite anybody in this room to email me anything you have, because we're going to be having a day-long grandma's boot camp.
That's awesome. Thanks, Irene. We actually have a specialist that is full-time dedicated to just the education. Her name is Guy Pelaez, and she is wonderful. She's been doing it now for about 3 years. And some of the resources she provides is she will come and actually speak to classes or speak to groups. In fact, no, that would be great. And we actually, in all seriousness, we'd love to send her out here to work with you, and maybe we can do a bigger event, maybe at the college or even here at this event center. And she does that. But the biggest thing that I think that she's useful in helping with is, again, that curriculum. We need to make sure it's taught correctly. Sometimes I think our educators don't do the best job about explaining oil and gas and what it does, not just from it powering everything and oil, going into plastic and everything that we need that way, but also what it means to. Happy to get you in touch with her or anyone else here. She can come and do that. If for any of you producers, if your employees have kids and would like to do some sort of event with Guy, more than happy to set that up. She'd love to get out here and speak with you. We work with Chevron a lot on scholarships. We also definitely encourage you and your kids to apply for scholarships through Chevron. We help select those winners. We give out about 21-ish, depending on the funding, scholarships a year through Chevron. For that.
One of my granddaughters is going into engineering at the University of Utah. So she's already taking classes and even told me, Grandma, I need your training quick.
Good.
So anyway, thank you.
Good. Yes, absolutely. Please get in touch with me, and we'll gladly set something up.
Sorry, does he do like stuff at elementary level?
Oh yeah, it includes. We're doing it not just at the university level. Probably didn't make that known well enough. We're engaging with the State Board of Education on those things. I know that we're engaging with PLIPCO as well, with Reg on some education campaigns as well. But we're doing everything from elementary school through university and trade school.
Edith Valdez has a question online.
Do you want me to go first? Go ahead, Edith.
I had a question as far as like training resources. Do you offer it for newcomers to the, I'm new at this industry. So I just, not only for school students, do you just offer it for something that's hired onto this kind of a career, but doesn't, get training on or more familiar with energy? You guys offer something like that, not students, just new to the agency?
Yeah, we don't offer a specific education program. Like Guy doesn't go out and teach a class at a university or anything like that. But we'd be happy to sit down with you and provide you the resources and information that we have about Utah's energy resources and the business here. I could also check with Guy and ask her if she has any PowerPoint slides or pamphlets on this. I don't know if you can still see my email address, but please email me and I'd be happy to provide you what we have.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks.
So this is John Baza again. Just wanted to mention, along with what OED does, we have a program called our Mineral and Petroleum Literacy Workshops. And it's been going for, I think, close to 10 years. And we started it out as an effort to educate teachers in fourth grade curriculum so they would understand how to educate students on geology, energy, and minerals. And we contract with a company called Loose in the Lab that goes out and does teacher workshops every year. And in fact, they're going to be starting a new round of workshops in September. And they go to many school districts across the state and up to Cache County, down to Emery County, Carbon County, various places. And it started out as working our way into the fourth grade curriculum because that's where they had a specific unit on geology and earth sciences. That has now shifted down to the second grade level, but we've adapted the program to second grade students and teachers. And I can give you more information on that if you want it, but it's probably something we should be coordinating with Key on so she knows what we're doing.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned energy transmission. As California tries to phase out its reliance on fossil fuels, is there any push to redirect, like from the Intermountain Power Plant, the electricity that's generated in Utah to keep it in Utah if California doesn't want it?
Great question. So I went down, I toured IPP, was that the beginning of last month? And California is still going to be reliant on IPP. It sounds like IPP is switching over to natural gas. And so that energy is still going to be going down to California. And then the eventual goal is to move that on to hydrogen by, I want to say, is it 2035? And so, yeah, they're still going to be reliant on IPP for that, but it'll be natural gas. The California law only prohibits coal, but not natural gas. Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. Why don't we take a break for about 15 minutes and we'll get our next presentation up and we'll get back there. There's plenty of food out there. So. I think what happened was my computer went to sleep with the first guy. It shut down. So I had a window open. So I'm not sure. Thanks for saving whatever you did. Where was it? We'd like to get started if you take your seats for our last presentation. Okay, our last presentation will be by Bart Kettle. He'll be discussing, he is the Deputy Director of the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, and he'll be talking about our new penalties rule and where we're going with that and how that came about. So, Bart?
Okay, thank you, John. So I'm here today to talk about our penalty rulemaking in the oil and gas program. And just to cover the reason for talking about it real quickly, we're trying to make some effort to make sure that nobody's surprised by penalty rulemaking. So as I'll cover in the presentation, it already is in effect. We're kind of trying to take every chance we can to speak with industry about the penalty rulemaking and just let them know that it's in place. So before I get into the penalty rulemaking, maybe a quick slide to help me calm my nerves down and cover a few things that's going on in the industry. So if we look at a couple things industry-wise that are interesting, we look at prices. John Rogers covered that earlier this morning. They're functionally double what we seen last year. Kind of as John talked about, I doubt any of us seen that coming last year in June, July time period. We didn't think we'd be at the place we are price-wise right now. So that's a big change. Along with that, just kind of some of the trends that we see within the oil and gas program. So 250 APDs, APD stands for Application for Permit to Drill, submitted to the program so far this year. Applications are a fairly respectable indicator of what kind of activity we might expect in the state in the future. To put a little context on what 252 APDs mean, that's as many APDs as we've seen submitted in an entire year since 2015 in most years. So we're on pace, should this rate continue, to see the most applications for permit to drill since the 2015 time period. 120 wells spudded in the year 2021 up to this point. That compares to only 59 in the entire year of 2020. And then we've been bouncing between kind of 8 and 10 drilling rigs in the state over the last 3 months. So right in there, about 9 rigs. We're hearing a few things from industry that make us think that we may actually go to 10 rigs and above and sustain there here in the near future. And then as John covered in his presentation at the start, we've seen some recent production increases. So production of oil and gas in the state of Utah took a pretty hard hit with COVID, kind of the May to July period last year, and then stabilized a little bit, trended down a little. Obviously, we weren't drilling wells, we weren't completing wells. And then just this last reporting period, we've seen an increase. We'll have to wait and see how that continues. But with a few rigs drilling wells again in the state and wells being completed, we anticipate production may be up a little bit. Okay, so penalty rulemaking. Just a little bit of a brief history behind penalty rulemaking, what it is and how it came to be. So it gets its start in the 2020 general session, but maybe if we could take just a step back beyond that, it has a start previous to that. The oil and gas program had an audit that basically gave us a recommendation we enforce administrative rule. And part of that was penalties. But what we found is the process of issuing penalties was a very cumbersome process. It wasn't very efficient. And the legislature on some level recognized that as well. And so in the 2020 general session, Senate Bill 148 was passed, which basically directed the division and the Board of Oil and Gas and Mining to go through a penalty rulemaking process. And what that was recognizing was the need to do two things. One, to protect the state from poor practices through the mechanism of penalties. The other thing that was recognized is there was a need to protect responsible operators from those who weren't keeping operations in a manner that would allow kind of the responsible component to continue operating. So SB 148 passed, directed penalty rulemaking. In August of 2020, a series of stakeholder meetings was started. We had 7 stakeholder meetings into March of 2021. And then at the regularly scheduled board hearing on May 26th, penalty rulemaking was approved by the board effective May 27th. So a couple things that I've been coached to talk about in presentations is why do I care and what does it mean to me? So if we can go back to this, folks in the room, why do you care? Because penalty rulemaking has been changed. And what does it mean to me? Hopefully I can cover that in the next sequence of slides. Okay, so on the left, there's just a picture of a notice of violation that any operator would receive. And that notice of violation kicks off the penalty process. And so there's several things that have to happen in order for penalties to be put in place. The first is a notice of violation issued by the division. That notice of violation would have to have 4 things: a nature of the violation, what actions are required by the operator to resolve that violation, the time period, very specific time period that the operator has to resolve the violation, and a fairly descriptive of what portion of the operations the violation relates to. And here's the key part about that. If a violation is resolved within the abatement period spelled out in the NOV, then there's no penalty accrued. If the violation exists after the abatement period has passed, then a penalty be assessed from the date that the NOV was issued. So you have a very specific time period to abate the NOV. If that's not abated, then that's when the penalty starts to accrue. And then operators can request a compliance conference with a representative of the division to kind of get specifics on the NOV should they have questions on it. So let's just take a second. Let's talk about how this might work in a real life sense. I'm just going to choose that there's inadequate containment. Let's say that there's a berm that's wore down. The division would issue a notice of violation. That notice of violation would specify that there's inadequate containment at the site. It would give a time required based on division compliance procedures, so that would be 30 days. It would set a date to resolve that. The action is obviously provide adequate containment and a description of what it applies. Let's just say this berm is around tanks at a well. So it would say, you know, berm around, let's just say tanks 1 and 2 at, I'm just going to pick an arbitrary name on the well, the Blacktail 2426 well. If the operator goes in and fixes the berms or replaces them in that 30-day time period, the notice of violation is abated and there's no penalty accrue. Okay, so let's walk down the road. If the violation isn't abated, what happens next? An assessment officer by the division will determine the penalty amount, and this is a tentative amount following the due date of the violation. That assessment officer will take into consideration aggravating and mitigating factors at that time, and the penalty will be assessed based on 3 classes. At the left, you can see a picture of a document will be provided with the NOV. I'm going to move on to the classes, just a little more detail on that to kind of help folks understand what those are. So first and foremost, I'm not going to try to cover each one of the classes here in this presentation, but if you have detailed questions about what they might be, I'd really encourage you to go look at R649 11-3, the administrative penalty assessment. It'll spell all of those out for you. But 3 classes, if we can look at them at a high level, so there's a little bit of description on the slide. I'm not going to read through it. I'm just going to cover them kind of in a context at a high level. Class 1 violation is the lowest. What you should view those at, or what I hope you take away from this, is those are primarily reporting violations. Class 2, those are primarily going to be operating violations, i.e. a berm might fit into that. And then class 3 would be violations that are related to permitting, some sort of activity being undertaken without the adequate permitting being in place. Okay, and then just to cover at a high level, a couple limitations involved with penalty rulemaking. The first being that the division can assess up to $5,000 per day for penalties. Anything above 5,000 has to be assessed by the board. The board can assess up to $10,000 per day for a penalty. A maximum of $200,000 can be assessed per penalty per person. And then the final thing is penalties can be appealed to the board within 30 days. So that concludes my presentation. Hopefully at a high level I was able to cover, like, why do I care? What does this mean to you? If there's any questions on maybe some specifics or more details, I'd be happy to take those right now. Give us 1 second, Darren. There you go.
Oh, I have a mic. Just a question I had. A lot of your penalties are associated with the threats to public health. Sometimes the health department issues penalties for violations of public health. How do we coordinate those, or is there anything in your rules that would require you to coordinate those penalties or actions?
That was actually quite a bit of discussion in the penalty rulemaking process. There's not necessarily language specifically to that coordination component of coordinating with other agencies as far as the penalty rulemaking is concerned. But ideally, we would coordinate those interpersonally, knowing what's going on, and coordinate that with the operator at the time the penalty occurs. Yeah, Chris, give him just 1 second to get a mic.
Would any of those rules be like, or those penalties be like retroactive, or is it just when you find the NOV, or you find that and then it's from then going forward and when it wasn't taken care of?
Yeah, no, they won't be retroactive. One, we've updated our NOV form to reflect some of the requirements of penalty rulemaking. So if there's an NOV out there prior to penalty rulemaking being put in place, there will not be a penalty retroactive on it. And then two, this very specific time periods of what the violation is, the time period to abate, that will all be things covered in the NOV form, so they won't be retroactive.
Is that something, Bart?
Uh-oh, hardest question of the day.
No, I just think it's something, yes, why are you doing this? Because we always had the ability to do penalties, but we had to take it to the board, and then we had to take it to district court. And that level was so hard that it didn't get done. So now the board can assess that penalty, and then it always can be appealed, but now there will be more reality, and this will have more teeth in the law. And I think it's important that way. But the other thing to look at it is there really is no need to get a penalty. I mean, you really think about it. You're given an NOV and a period of time to correct it, just correct it. And that's what we're after. We don't really want to make this a moneymaker. We want to make it to correct the problem. And if you have it and ignore it, then that's why you're going to get in trouble. But most prudent operators will correct it immediately and be done with it. John.
And Bart, you covered this very quickly. I don't know that you talked in detail about it, but even when you receive the notice of violation, there's an opportunity for the operator to request a conference with the division to determine if that violation should have even been issued.
Yeah, there is the opportunity for a compliance conference with the division, correct?
Does this apply to abandoned wells, or is it just for active?
It would apply to wells with a responsible operator. So when you say abandoned, I'm assuming you're probably talking orphan wells where there wouldn't be a responsible operator. There wouldn't be somebody to penalize in that scenario. Did I read your question correctly? Okay, well, I've seen lots of notes taken, so hopefully I covered the subject reasonably well. If I can just kind of conclude, John actually really covered this, but in the stakeholder engagement process, we tried to make a rule that really takes steps to protect responsible operations. What we see as a regulatory body in the division is most of industry wants to do what's right. We're trying hard to do that, but periodically we get operations that can hurt the reputation or hurt the functions of responsible operation. And so the penalty rulemaking, if you walk away from anything today, I hope it's really designed to try and help responsible operations in the state be protected from operations that are maybe not quite as prudent. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Bart. Well, now we appreciate everyone that spoke with us today. I think we learned a lot and we want to cover a lot of territory. But now it's time for our collaborative session. That's where we get to talk. We've got a lot of smart people in the room, a lot of people from different areas of the industry and government types. So does anyone want to start that out for anything they want to say? Yep.
John, how's your staffing? In the past, Dogma's had staffing challenges. How's your staffing related to your APDs? Are you able to keep up with the current workflow based on what you have?
I'll let one of you guys answer that.
Yeah. Are you able to hear me? I know there are people in the room, but the mic doesn't sound like it's on. Thank you. Okay, that's a good question. So just to give an overview for everybody in the room, actually, the oil and gas program is currently sitting at 26 people. That's up from 21 people 18 months ago. Your question specifically is that enough to handle the increased APDs? We think so. The future is a little bit unclear to us, as it is to everybody. There's obviously, I've heard multiple people today talking about a REL and what that might mean to the basin. And of course, commodity prices they're up there right now. And so do we have concern or do we worry if we see applications for permit to drill continue to increase? Rather, we'll be able to keep up. Yeah, we do worry about that. We recently brought on 2 people that will be working in the permitting group for that exact purpose, to try to preemptively have people in place and up to speed on the process before we get hit hard by what we think could be an increase in applications.
Thanks, Bart. Well, if I don't see any volunteers, I can start picking on people. Okay, Ricky.
We have a few announcements. So before I get to some events that we're hosting, I just want to say thank you to Senator Winterton back there and to our Duchesne and Uinta County Commissioners. We hosted a legislative site tour. Some of you are familiar with this on June 25th, and we had about 50 folks come out roughly from our state legislature, and we were able to kind of do some basic education about how the oil and gas industry works and some of the things that we're doing on an environmental and an air quality standpoint and water conservation efforts, and talking about the growth that we see for the basin and how that's going to impact the local economy. And so thank you for everyone that was involved with that, and it was a great event. We'll hopefully expand that next year. UPA is hosting some events that I wanted to let everyone know about coming up as well. We have a monthly lunch and learn that covers different topics. It's open to the public. Anyone can attend. You just need to go to our website, which is utahpetroleum.org, to register. So it's always the last Tuesday of the month at noon. That's the 27th of July. And this month we're going to be talking about ESG. So big buzzword. What is ESG, environmental social governance? What does that score mean? How is it important for financing? Even more so in our current political environment. What does that mean to your day-to-day operations? So it should be a really interesting one. Again, just go to our website to register. It's free. It's open to the public. We also have our golf tournament coming up, our Oil and Gas Classic on September 9th. Our teams are totally full. So if you haven't registered yet and you want to, you need to actually sponsor a hole, which comes with a foursome. But we'd love to have you. It's a great event at Soldier Hollow and Wasatch Mountain. And we usually get about 500 folks from the industry upstream and downstream. And then on, I want to get the date right here. September 30th at Pleasant Valley, we're going to host our Uinta Basin Shootout, and we're doing this a little differently this year. We've been doing it for 2 years. It's been a great event, but we're going to expand it together with a food drive. So we're going to call it the Basin Shootout Hunger Campaign. And we're going to, for the 2 weeks prior to that event, have a Uinta Basin operators food drive that'll go on for 2 weeks in September. So we're coordinating right now with the Utah Food Bank and the Roosevelt Food Pantry. But we'll be doing that food drive for 2 weeks and then have our basin shootout. We'd love to see you all there. We're registering teams of 5, whether you're a sharpshooter or a novice. It's a great event to come out and join us for the day. And we'll do our awards for the winner of the food drive at lunch. So if anyone's interested, let me know or check our website. There's details up on all of that. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ricky. I'd like to endorse her Lunch and Learn. It's been a very positive event, and you learn something you really didn't think about much, and you get some good speakers there. So it's very, very good. So take time to go to that. Any more questions, comments? What about DEQ? Be quiet. What's up with you guys?
Waiting for the mic to get here gives you a second to compose your thoughts, right? Which I always need. So first of all, I appreciated you guys continuing this through the shutdown online so that we could keep it going, and then also jumping on to get it back in person. It's good to see everybody in person again. I don't think I have anything for the group today other than I'm the district engineer for DEQ in the Uinta Basin, doing a lot of things with all the different divisions of the Department of Environmental Quality. So if you have any questions or want to talk to me about it or anything, I'll hang out for a few minutes afterwards. Thanks.
I noticed you have a new executive director. Have things changed over dramatically, or is it life the same?
So Kim Shelley was the deputy director, and she's now the director. So her mentality and approach was right in line with Scott Baird's. So really, it hasn't really changed at all. Just changed the name and changed the face.
Okay, quiet bunch today. Well, we appreciate you being here today. It's good to be back together. Our next meeting will be October 14th. And I'd have to say we're going to be here again. So hopefully things will remain and the COVID will continue to decrease and we'll be able to continue life as we know it. So anyway, appreciate your support. I'd like to thank Matt, Bart, Jake for presenting today. I appreciate Duchesne County providing this facility and all they do for us, and the management here at the event center. We get here and we get here the day before and hook all this magic up in the back that these guys do, and their support has been super. So anyway, without any more comments, we'll conclude and see you next October. Thanks.